Personal sacrifice is huge. There is no soccer game on Saturday. There's no Sunday dinner with the family. You're working because some guy in China or in India or some woman out there is kicking your, because we're in a global competition now. And so I don't care what your business is, men, women, you have to understand that you're going into a huge lifestyle change. And I tell people it's not for everybody. Don't do it if you don't have the stamina to get kicked around and driven into the ground and get up and do it again and beaten up by people that tell you, this is not kumbaya stuff, this is hardcore stuff. Don't be embarrassed to talk about money. You're going to be talking about money for the rest of your life. It's always going to be part. You can't live without it. You have to deal with it. It can cause great joy and give you personal freedom, or can be catastrophic in your life, destroy your happiness completely. Your choice is, where does it fit? Do you want it to destroy your life, or would you prefer that you understand how it works and respect it for what it is and deal with it? That's a personal choice people have to make. And I would say the best way to do that is learn more, talk more about it, and don't be afraid to discuss it. I don't care what age you're at, but certainly at the age of 16, you should be discussing that. And above all, taking 10% of whatever anybody gives you, your grandmother, your birthday gift, whatever it is, and set it aside and start investing it. The earlier you start, the less pressure you have when you're in your 60s. Because you got to have at least $1.5 million in the bank, and you can, if you just save $100 a week. That's what Beanstalks is all about. Well, don't pursue entrepreneurship out of greed of money. You will fail for sure. Because every time I talk to anybody that's had a big liquidity event, I say, you know, did you see it coming, and how did it happen? They said, we never saw it coming. We were just working one day, and then boom, I was poor, now I'm rich. That's always the way it is. It's not that you're saying you're counting, you know, your dollars. You don't have any until one day, boom, something happens. And then the funny thing is, you find yourself right back to work. You'll have to listen to your gut to navigate the bombs of your career, and you have to trust it. You have to trust your gut. Every time I've lost dough, every time, and I've lost plenty, luckily I've had more successes than failures, is when I didn't listen to my gut, which is my experience. Your gut will tell you. You'll know when it's right and wrong, and don't go against your intuition. That is actually your radar. That's your DNA speaking to you, figuring out what the next move's going to be. Your experiences make you who you are over time as an entrepreneur, as a parent, as a person, as whatever you are, as a brand, whatever you are. It's your experiences and how you deal with them that gives you that equity over time. And for many people, they can't make it. It doesn't work out for them. They don't have what it takes to take on the abuse that the world's going to throw at you. I prefer to invest in entrepreneurs that have failed once or twice before, that have felt the sting of failure and have gone down the road and not had success the first time, because their motivations are completely different than a more arrogant first timer that thinks everything they do is going to make $100 million. It's just doesn't work that way. And so that's one thing. There's three things you have to have the ability to do and know if you're going to be successful in business. Number one is you have to be able to articulate your idea in 90 seconds or less, explaining to me why anybody would want that product or service. And if you take more than a minute and a half, you're never going to be successful. You're just not. And number two is you have to be able to explain why you're the right person to execute on that idea. In other words, what is it about you that knows how to take this idea, which good ideas are a dime a dozen. Executional skills are really hard to find. So what is it about you that can execute on this business and make it work? I mean, those two together start to be really interesting, because then as an investor looks at it and says, well, I'm going to mitigate my risk. I got a great executional, expert here, and I've got a great idea. And then lastly, the one that I think you have to have a good command of, you have to know your numbers. You have to be able to explain gross margins, market share, break-even analysis, how many competitors, how fast can you grow? And I think, that's who I want to invest in, someone who has a command of all three of those. That's probably got more than a 50% chance of being successful if they can do that right. In America, what sets you free is to have enough financial resources to spend your day doing things that you want to do. It's one of the greatest freedoms you can have. And what I learned about it, when I had my first liquidity event, I was young, and we sold the learning company for $4.2 billion. And there were 10 of us who were founders. So what I found so amazing is everybody showed up the next day after we closed right back at their desks because they didn't know anything else. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to work. And what I found in life is I work harder today than I've ever have, and I don't need to, but I still want to, and this is what I know. And so the whole idea that I don't have to do something, I work with Nancy Chung, who sort of manages my day, and I block it off into 30-minute things. And each week, maybe on a Saturday morning or something, we review the next week, and I look at all the things that are in book. And if I see something I don't want to do, I just say, take it off. I'm not doing it. And there's nothing anybody can do about that. That is my ability to be free to choose the things that mean something to me and avoid the ones that don't, because my most valuable asset at this point is my time.
So much of what I've always felt as an entrepreneur was a vulnerability of a school system is not the cliche stuff that you might see in my content, but just by nature, all of us spending the majority of our youth in a system that grades us every 90 days, and we pander to a subjective reality within that, really sets us up to eliminate our creativity and our curiosity, makes us subconsciously conform to the short term, and inherently makes us lack patience. The other thing I'm spending a lot of time on is how much we struggle with our relationship in time and with time. We get sold so many things like life is short, which, I think all of us at this point know, depending on the context that you look at a statement or a situation, it changes the altercation. But so many of the rules in society of when you're supposed to have your life figured out, get married, accomplish, is predicated on a world where people live to 45 years old. It's just the reality of it. So much of what we're affected by is how our grandparents were affected by their parents and grandparents, and those were dying at 40. Of course you should have your life figured out at 30 when you're dead at 47. But we haven't adjusted. 1880 may seem a long time ago, but it's stunningly not. And when life expectancy is in the late 30s and early 40s, and now we're 75, 85, 90, 95, I just think that there's so much confusion in the system. And I just think that we need to have different conversations. Let me give you an example. A different conversation that we need in the business world, that's where I'll keep it, but it's clearly a societal statement, is I'm genuinely struggling why anybody should not be kind. I've watched in the business world for the last 20 years, people justify being cruel to the people that they're a manager of or they're admins because they're stressed. I'm sorry I scolded you, you don't get it, the client had me in a bad day. We have completely accepted bad behavior off of, I'm really passionate about this. If you're a leader by nature, your job is to stop pressure at your level, not deploy more of it underneath you. I think that we need to just do better. And I think that I'm passionate at this point in my life to really start talking about the nuances that are very clear to me, that sustainable things are grounded in very good virtues, and that we have to start recognizing that soft skills will continue to dominate and gain momentum because hard skills are starting to be commoditized. The most insecure place I've ever been in was the fear of confrontation, which blows people's mind because on stage and public persona, candor is my strength. But in real life, I hated candor because my father was very aggressive with candor, but very negative. And I wasn't able to separate the vehicle he was deploying the candor in from the value of candor. So for 25 years of my career, I was anxious every time I decided somebody had to get fired. It completely put me into spirals. I would avoid it. It was always sloppy. To a T, every person that's ever been close to me in business that works for me or worked for me that doesn't love me is based on one thing, my inability to be candorous. And it's been a very big shift for me in the last 3-4 years. The new book is called 12 and a half. It's about 13 attributes, but I call it 12 and a half because I'm only halfway through my journey on kind candor. And I needed to create the word kind in front of candor to even begin to deploy candor. And it has led to an incredible amount of unhappiness in my life and career, was my inability to be candorous, which is wild because my content is incredibly candorous because I'm not talking to anybody. I'm talking to everybody. But when it's Steve or Sally or Johnny or Nicole or Karen, it was very hard for me. And so now I do it.
What I have learned in 14 years, and I've learned it a good 10 years ago, I'd say, is I never choose a business, I always choose the entrepreneur. I have sat there and listened to business plans that I don't even know what they're talking about. It makes no sense to me what they're talking about because it's not a business I know or I don't understand the terminology. And in the old days, I would have thought I was too stupid, but now I know I'm smart enough that if I'm not understanding it, it's okay. I'm probably still smart. But I have to be really smart in making the choice of the individual. Do I trust this person? Can I visualize them going through a wall? What's their background? Are they good at getting back up? Do they have ambition? Not passion. Passion's so overrated. I feel passionate. We really wanted to do this. Like saying you're excited about your first date. Who cares? Wait till you marry the lady and see how you feel. But I think the commitment and the drive and the ambition is what I'm always looking for. You know what? I think in hindsight, if I wasn't dyslexic and I didn't have a hard time in school, I don't think I would have been successful, believe it or not. Because I think everything I've done in my life has been one long attempt to show the world that I'm not stupid. So I'm driven. The difference between the really good ones and the ones that don't make it are the ones that don't make it know how to be a victim. They feel sorry for themselves, they blame the next guy, and they don't take the responsibility as their own. And that's what an entrepreneur does. You're the boss, it's your problem, period. It's your problem, it rests with you. Now what are you going to do about it? I'm not very nice or fair-minded with rich kids. The problem with investing in a business owned by a rich kid is usually raise money already rather easily. It's not sweat equity. So you got a chunk of change to get started. Okay, that's nice. Now you would think that would make things easier. I think it makes things difficult. You don't spend your money wisely. It's Papa's money or your parents' friends' money or wherever you got it from. So it's not valuable money. And I've seen more people stand and say, well, we pivoted. We lost that and we pivoted. What happened to the guys that gave you the cash? What happened to them? No regard at all. Okay? When you get a poor kid, they typically have something to prove. They really have to stretch every penny. It's their own money. They're dying just to get a little bit more. There's so much a greater need. And there's also a desire to do well in living in their life. They want to go on vacations. They too want to get a sports car. They want to get a nice apartment. These rich kids have had it all before. They've been on vacation everywhere. They've always had rich cars, rich parents. So I think it's so much harder for a rich kid to succeed as an entrepreneur. I just love poor kids. And I have to tell you, out of my whole portfolio, I don't have a single rich kid who succeeded. School is tough on kids that can't learn. I was one of those kids, myself and my two brothers. The other kids were A students, but we just couldn't read, we couldn't write, we couldn't learn. And what happens to a kid when you're in a school situation is you judge yourself based on school grades. What else do you have? Someone could say, she's such a nice girl. Well, that might sound good, but if you're getting all Fs, you feel terrible. You just feel terrible. And so your sense of self, I think, is formed very much by how good a student you are in all school systems. And it shouldn't be, because it's just one kind of intelligence, of course, but it is that way when you're a student. You sum yourself up based on whether you could get good grades or not. It's as simple as that. I had been working for the Giafuni brothers, two developers in New York City, as my first job, answering their phone as a receptionist, and decided to go out on my own and start a real estate business. But I needed a listing. And so I went to Mr. Giafuni and asked him if he could just give me one listing that I could rent out, an apartment to rent. And he gave me his worst, 3L, which was on the third floor in the back, which had previously been a superintendent's dark apartment. So looking at this, I didn't have a lot of money to spend. I had to place one ad in the New York Times, that precious ad, how to describe that apartment to attract customers in. And so I thought about it, And finally, after looking at columns of competitive ads in the Times, I had an idea and asked Mr. Jafuni, could he build a half wall with a double entrance that separated the L in the living room from the rest of the living room, because most apartments in New York had L-shaped living rooms. He was willing to do it because I told him I thought I could get him another $40 a month. Not $300 that he wanted, but $340. And in went my ad. 1 bedroom and den, $340. Competing with all the other apartments that said 1 bedroom, $300, $310, $315, something like that. And I got probably 80 phone calls, because who the heck would want to go in and see a 1 bedroom for, say, $300 when they could get a 1 bedroom and den for $340? And that phone never stopped ringing. And I ran that ad again and again because Mr. Jafuni gave me every 1 bedroom he had and built a wall in every unit.
Inflation index bonds as an indicator, or other indicators, I'm losing percentage points to inflation by holding that bond. And then when they, and people realize that, well, you don't want to do that. And then the other side of it was you want to borrow and buy stuff because, money's free. So companies borrow and buy stuff, and individuals buy houses because interest-only loans on the houses. I mean, like, okay, I can buy a house, I can buy an apartment. And so, but that creates the imbalance where it's terrible to be a lender and a creditor, and it's good to be a borrower and do that. So that imbalance takes place. It produces inflation. And then when it produces inflation and so on, then you say, I don't want to own these things anymore. And then, and also the Federal Reserve says, I better fight inflation. They change things. And so by raising interest rates to levels in which it goes from minus 1.7% in inflation index bonds to plus 1.7%, and it makes it, and it raises the short-term interest rates, real interest rates much higher, then lo and behold, all the people who did all those things get hurt. You as an individual should think about the total safety, including maybe that terrible scenario doesn't happen. Okay, that's what I'd like you to do. That's what I'd like you to do. And if you do that, you will come to a better balanced position. I want you to get balance. I want you to have enough saving, to have security, to build the first level. Investing, which is the same as savings, comes in tiers. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 on risk. And the first tier is, if everything goes wrong, I'm okay. And everything could be inflation, depression, anything, whatever it is. I lose my job. Whatever it is, I got that thing covered. Then your next level is, okay, what am I going to get the highest returns? What is my best bet? And then, 2, that it's not just the investment, it's where am I? Am I in the middle of a fight? Like, I don't want to be in the middle of a fight. Okay, what's it going to be like? So it does have geographic implications. I don't know, maybe it's the state or the state you go to, or the city you go to, or the country you go to, or whatever it is, and there are certain things you can do to say this one's going to be better than that one. Let me give you an example of that. There are 3 things you could do based on these 3 influences. Are you going to be in a place and around people and circumstances that are financially strong? In other words, are they earning more than they're spending, and they have a good balance sheet? Because that means stability. If you can go through that, then you have stability. Places that are like that are better off. Number two, do they have internal conflict? Country, place, and is it a hospitable environment for me? Okay, that's the second. And then third, are they in the risk of an international war? I don't want to be where the fighting is. I really don't. I don't want to be safe and stable and so on. So this is a time for looking for such things.
My truth in my experience has been, I have to jump higher. I have to show up earlier. I have to be the first person to turn off the light and the last person to turn off the light. I have to make sure that every number is correct and every T is crossed and every die is dotted. The way that I show up is by being consistent, so consistent that people cannot doubt your capacity to succeed. You have to work harder than the average person. And if you accept those terms, you cannot complain about those terms. I have only known success on the back of consistency. Do I think you could be a success without being consistent? Perhaps, if you have other resources and tools that I was never given. But coming from where I am, my perspective has only been consistency, and the discipline has been everything that I have ever gotten on the back of doing it again and again and again. It is what I teach, it is what I preach, it is what I believe. I'm going to give the advice that I heard my third year of business. I was sitting with a group of other photographers who were farther in their career, and I had always found a way, even though I couldn't afford to get educated specifically in the photography realm because there was very high ticket experiences, I would find a way to leverage what I thought I was good at in exchange. And so I found a photographer in my area. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I said, hey, would I be able to go to your event and write a few blog posts about your event? And in addition to, if you let me come, could I also write your bio, for your website? Because I gave a little preview. I was his bio was just great photographer, love my camera. And I kind of wrote just the first paragraph of what could be his bio based on things that I had read about him on the internet. And he was just yes. So I got into this room, and what he said, I felt it just pierced my heart. And this is the thing that I will tell everybody again and again. He said, jump and the net will appear. And it was the first time in my entire life that I had ever heard somebody speak so brazenly about taking a risk. Again, who I am now as a risk taker is so different than who I was when I began. And the way that you strengthen that risk muscle is by taking risks. And when he said that 3 years into it, I realized, okay, now is the time for me to start taking those risks. I wish somebody would have told me that sooner. Let's just be real, right? People hear that jump in the net will appear, jump at the universe has your back, and we love it. We're high-fiving because we've been on the other side. But there have been plenty of times where there was no net, and the universe was just I see you, I'm not putting my arms out, because you needed to fall on your face. And I've just realized that as many times as I have gotten back up, I was supposed to fall. I was supposed to face plant. And the less time I spend groveling in the gravel, the faster I find my next success. The biggest difficulty is that people fall and then they stay down. The greatest entrepreneurs are the people who understand that falling is part of the process. So if we just said, I'm going to fall now, and I'm going to fall probably another 175 times before the end of my career, if I look around and say, this is normal and every entrepreneur faces this, then yeah, it sucks. And yeah, I took the jump, and yeah, I didn't end up where I wanted to, but do I have the courage and wherewithal to get up again? And if the answer is yes, you're going to be in business. And the answer is no, you're going to go back to your cubicle and live a very predictable life that is not as fulfilling as you once hoped. We all face a particular narrative, regardless if it's professional or personal, because if you decide that you want to run a marathon, oftentimes the person who stops you from running a marathon is nobody else but you. If you want to start a business, the person who's stopping you is nobody else but you. If you decide to run the marathon, somebody's gonna have an opinion of you while they're sitting on their couch, no less. They will have an opinion that you decided to run the marathon or you didn't decide to run the marathon. While somebody is sitting on their couch behind their keyboard, they're gonna have an opinion of you starting a business or not starting a business. The fact of the matter remains, are you going to let somebody else's opinion dictate what you are going to do in your life and the reason you are put on this earth? Oftentimes, the person who stops ourselves from doing other things while we would like to point at other people because they have an opinion, it is actually us. We choose to believe, listen, adhere to somebody else's opinions, but somebody else's opinion of us doesn't pay our bills. The person who has an opinion about what it is you're doing was most likely never going to become a customer. So all of a sudden, somebody who is never going to buy or support the thing that we were going to do, be it passing out Gatorade on the marathon or by becoming a paying customer, they were never going to be that person, yet those are the people who we let stop us doing from the very thing that we do. We stop ourselves when what we need to say is, not everyone will be for us or about us. Do you accept the terms of that? And if you say yes, do it to the best of your ability.
So I think in the school system, they don't want us to learn about money because they just want to pump out good employees that do what they're told. I mean, if you look at school, it's opposite of what it takes to be successful in real life. Don't make a mistake. Do as you're told. Take tests by yourself. Don't cooperate. Do it by yourself. Do it on your own. And the last thing was, there's only one right answer. No, there's tons of answers to a problem. So you come out of school scared to death of making a mistake. You do everything on your own. You don't cooperate. There's no synergy. There's no brainstorming. And there's only one right answer. Everybody wants to get the right answer. There's no one right answer. So I think people come out of school paralyzed. I think the school system is criminal in that it kills a child's spirit of learning. You know, a child goes into school all excited about, yeah, I'm gonna learn and it's gonna be great. And then the teacher says, sit down and shut up. Don't talk. We don't care what you're interested in. Did anybody in school ever ask you, did the teacher ever ask you, Brian, what are you interested in? I never did. I never did. So they just teach you what they want to teach you instead of finding out what the child is interested in and teaching to that. So I think kids come out of school scared to death of making a mistake. They come out paralyzed. They don't know what they want to do because their spirit and their creativity has been crushed inside of them. So you almost have to do a whole reprogramming once you get out of school so you can find out what it is that excites you, what it is that where your passion is. When Robert and I had our first date back in 1984, he asked me in Hawaii. Okay. He said, "What do you want to do with your life?" I had been fired twice from the same job out of college, twice.
From the same job?
Yep. They fired me and they hired me back and they fired me again. And I knew I wanted my own business. So on our first date, he said, "What do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "I want my own business, but I don't know anything about entrepreneurship. I've never been around entrepreneurs." And Robert said, "Well, I've started several businesses and all of my friends are entrepreneurs." I'm like, "Great, perfect." So 2 months later, I started my first business. But the funniest thought I had coming from an employee was, "Oh, now my time is my time. I'll do it whenever I want. And I'll have all this free time and it's going to be on my schedule." Wrong. No, you work 24/7. I had no free time. And I'm like, okay, so that was a myth I had, but that was my mindset as an employee, that where you work 9 to 5, oh, now I can get up and I can start at 11. And if I want to work at night, I can work at night. No, you're working, especially when you're starting a business, it's 24/7. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It is not. Because you're always pushing the envelope, right? And the purpose of an entrepreneur is to solve problems. So every day something happens and you're like, oh, I didn't expect that. And you got to deal with it. And I also say entrepreneurship is the fast track to personal development. Because every day, right, you're facing something right here. It's like, oh man, and you can't back down from it. You gotta deal with it. They say like 50% of businesses fail. And I think what happens for a lot of first-time business owners, they're coming out of a job. So they're coming out of an employee mindset. And I know this one guy, for example, in Phoenix, Arizona, and he decided he was going to start his own business. And he had been an employee all his life. So what's the first thing he does? He goes and rents a nice office space. Then he buys all the nice furniture. Then he gets a secretary. He hasn't made not $1. And he spends all this because he thinks that's what an entrepreneur looks like. Versus, go make the money first, then go rent your office. If you even need an office, start out of your home. We all started, all the entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs I know, all started out of their home. But a lot of people I see, they quit their job, they start their part-time business, and because they're struggling for money, they make bad decisions because they're just trying to find how to put money in their pocket to keep their business alive. So I think if you are an employee, that's a smart way to go. What you just said, to start a part-time business, start learning what it takes. The reality, you got to get the reality of what it takes. And I came across a study, and it was a study of centenarians, people that had lived over 100, and they wanted to find what were the common denominators, and they found 3. And one was they had a sense of purpose. It didn't matter how big or small, but they had a sense of purpose. Number 2, they were optimistic. And number 3 was resiliency, how well you come back from a setback. When you hit that wall, do you fall down? Do you get up? Do you go through it? And I'm like, those seem like the three characteristics of a good entrepreneur to me. Sense of purpose, optimistic, and resilient.
Yeah.
If you're not resilient and you can't persevere, do not become an entrepreneur.
Did you ever read anything? And I said, no, I can't read. Now that wasn't true, I could, but not well. And he said, the secret of the ages are locked up in books. If you do exactly what I tell you, you can have anything you want. Well, of course, I didn't believe that. I mean, I had never had what I wanted. And so when he said that, there's no way that I could believe it. But there was one key point. I believed he believed it. And for some strange reason, I think I locked into that. He gave me a book. He gave me this book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. All I wanted was some money. I figured if I had some money, my whole world would change. And my first goal, where he said, you've got to sit down and you've got to write your goal. You've got to write it on a card and you've got to carry the card in your pocket. I've been doing that now for 55 years. I wrote on the card that I was going to have $25,000 by New Year's Day of 1970. I really didn't believe it would happen. I gave myself almost a decade to do it. And the foundation of this is anything the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. Well, I've altered that a bit for the start. I think anything the mind can conceive, if you think about it often enough, you will come to believe it. So you don't have to believe it to start off with, because I didn't believe it. And I'm speaking from experience here. I didn't believe I'd ever get to $25,000. I didn't even know anyone with $25,000. But I kept reading the book. Now, a strange thing happened. See, when you write something, writing causes thinking. Thinking creates an image. The image then is impregnated into cells in your brain. Our belief system's based upon our evaluation of something. And frequently, if you reevaluate a situation, your belief about that situation will change. And suddenly, I realized I'd figured it out. It had taken me 9.5 years from that day in London, trying to figure out why did I change. 9.5 years later in the restaurant, it dawned on me. My belief system had changed because I was reevaluating who I was. But you start studying this material, and I can assure you one thing, you will begin to think. And all the great leaders, all down through history, have been in complete and unanimous agreement on that one point, that you and I become what we think about. We are all the same. We look different, we sound different, but when you get past the culture, and culture's nothing but group habit, that's exactly what it is. When you get past the culture, we are all the same. There is one mind. There's not millions of minds, there is one. And we are an individualized expression of it. And when we tap into that universal mind, it operates by law. The idea must move into form. That's one of the first laws of the universe, the perpetual transmutation of energy. You see, studying Napoleon Hill got me to study the laws that this whole universe operates with. You understand that winter never follows winter. When the tide goes out, it always comes back in. We have to understand that whatever Rembrandt or Van Gogh used, we have available to us. We're God's highest form of creation. Spirit flows to and through us. It's our responsibility to decide what we're going to do with it. I think we've got an obligation to do great work. We're only here for a short time, not a long time. And we've got the faculties and the ability to do great work. I think we should.